Good morning to all of you. I'm very happy for your invitation to speak before you. I could not refuse Brother Alan because we're companions in the education of the Muslims in Sulu, Tawi-Tawi, and Sulu and Tawi-Tawi. We have schools run by the Marist brothers. We're only like 2% in that province. The rest are Muslims, but 98%. In fact, we have a school, we call it Notre Dame School, a Catholic school with one Catholic. That one Catholic is a priest. It's still a Catholic school. So the task given to me is to give a reflection on the Synodal Church as a home for all. I've been visiting and moving around the Philippines because of the invitation to talk about synodality in Catholic schools. So almost every week I'm visiting regions to talk about how our Catholic educational institutions can be part in the journey of the Synodal Church. First, probably to contextualize and to give meaning and reason for synodality. Well, some may have their own reflections about why synodality, but I take on the article of Thomas Rauch, S.J., on the contemporary challenges of the global church. And he was talking about the demographic shifts. The demographic shifts, from Western to the global South, concentration of Catholicism, from Eurocentric to what he calls the global South. The reason why Pope Francis wants to include continents, association of Catholics, dioceses from other continents to participate in magisterial authority. And also, we know also the challenges around us, which impact also, the global church, also our congregation because of sexual abuse, because of the decline of vocation that I could feel also in the apostolic vicariate. Like in the bishop's residence, we used to have like 8 priests. Now we are only 2. And even among Marist brothers and other congregations, there used to be like 5 in each of the community. But now there are only 2. So you see the diminishment also of Catholic vocation. This is something that we all experience globally, the diminishment of vocations. And of course, this has consequences in terms of our ministry. Probably the reason why there are departures or going out of our church because of our inability to reach out to many of them. And they are welcomed very much by other, churches, evangelical churches, because of the gospel prosperity they're also teaching. So, and also we experience of the pluralism also in our own communities. For example, like one director of the school who asked me about, we are not used to this, but we have now Muslims in our schools. We have now a lot of born-again Christians in our schools. How can we, be more Catholic in our Catholic schools? So these are experiences of pluralism, even in the context of the classroom. And we experience also probably the loss of privilege that we used to have, even here in the Philippines, because of, less and less priests are, ministering to the people. In other words, in all of this, in the global context, we are experiencing
some departures of Catholics, some members, precisely because of all this context that we are into. It appears that we are losing some of them. And I think this is where synodality comes in, precisely because the church that we know no longer suffice to be able to journey, especially with people who have gone away from us or have gone astray. How can we bring them again? How can we journey together? This, I think, is precisely the meaning of and the challenge of why there should be synodality, why we should be a home for all and bring back the lost sheep in our own journey. So the Synodal Church is really a call for that church to be a home for all. And we need to enlarge the space of your tent. Probably the church that we know should not and no longer be the church that we should have to be able to respond to the context that we are into now. And what is this? I remember even in our synodal journey here in the Philippines, the church construed by people not around us, but people outside of the church, construed the church as, distant. In Tagalog, malayo masyado ang simbahan. And then, another description is, our church is so evasive. We can't catch them. We're looking for them. We want to be part of them, but they're evasive. And another description is, they're not of our kind. Hindi kauri. Ang layo nila. They're very far. That's basically, the synthesis of the consultation that we had here in the Philippines. That is the church in the Philippines construed by people outside of us. That's why they're saying that a lot, of Catholics that used to be people that used to be Catholics are moving away from us because we are already distant from them. Well, a way probably of describing it is this. Because probably of too much institutionalization, we have built walls, barriers, the church, and we are so comfortable inside, and they cannot go inside. They cannot come to us. That's why the image in the book of Revelation of Jesus knocking at the door, well, it has a lot of interpretations, but this time, Jesus is knocking inside the door, wanting to go out, so that he can meet people at the periphery. So we need to enlarge and to open our home again that probably we have built too institutionalized, too constricting, in fact, for people to come in, to be with us. So we have lost in our journey a lot of people because of what Thomas Rauch describes as contemporary challenges in the Catholic Church. But, these are challenges, and these challenges should become opportunities for renewal. That's the reason why the renewed church should really be a church for all, from too institutional to more relational church, to a more relational church. So we need to enlarge the space of your tent. That's the theme of the continental Asia. Enlarge the space of your tent. I know from South America, I think they use the theme of opening the eyes, Bartholomeus. And probably in other continents, they have a different, expression of being a church. But for us in Asia, it is to enlarge the space of our tent, to accommodate, precisely because of pluralism. So there's a quiet but unmistakable, but echoing through the heart of the church today, come, walk together. Not as strangers on the different roads, not as competitors with differing agendas, but as sisters and brothers, wounded, hopeful, listening, seeking the face of Christ in one another. This is the spirit of synodality. This is the spirit, the vision of the church, where we can all be at home again. That becomes a home for all. And we know this already, the church on the move, to move forth. What is synodality? The word synodality means walking together. It is not a program, a strategy, or a rhythm. It is a way of being. It is to allow the spiritual rhythm. It is to allow the breath of the Spirit once again to renew and give vigor to the church. A renewal, a church that walks with rather than ahead of her people. So in the Synodal Church, we see a shift from instruction to dialogue, from ruling to listening, from vertical authority to horizontal communion. Just to enflesh this, the meaning of this, I was asked by one of the participants last week, how can I be a synodal person? So I shared with him a story of a friend. He was a vice president of a Catholic school and a very good father and a very good, devout Catholic also. He knew he was, he knew that he's a very good person. But something happened to one of his sons. One of his sons became addicted to drugs. Addicted to drugs. He was not ready for that. He thought that he was really a good father, and probably he was really a very good father, except that one of his sons became addicted to drugs. He said, you know, Father, I have two choices. That is, I can use my power against him, or I can choose to journey with him. So, you know, he decided to strip himself from his position. He resigned from his work, from being vice president. He resigned, you know, he gave up his status as vice president and decided to be with his addicted son in Holo. He stayed in Holo for 2 months, for 2 years rather, until his son became rehabilitated. For him, this was an act, you know, of mercy and compassion. Instead of punishment, he decided to a father that accompanies his son. And he was very with the outcome, because he said he shifted from a father that is authoritarian to a father who is someone accompanying. But he gave up. He stepped down from his pedestal precisely because he wants to be with his son. I think in one way, that is also the meaning of being a synodal church. To step down from being too institutional, from the pedestal, and then decides to walk with people who are no longer walking with us. He was, for me, a synodal person. So it happened because of, you know, dialogue. Because he listened. Because instead of using authority, he decided to be in communion. So synodality redefines the church not merely as a hierarchical institution, but as a vibrant community. You know, we have, you know, I was president also of a university. My difficulty really was to get out from this institution and reach out and go to the periphery and bring them inside the institution. But because of ecclesial policies and policies inside the church, I had difficulty reaching out to the poorest of the poor, accommodating them. That feeling of, because I was in a very protected wall, that institution, the poorest of the poor, the most vulnerable, cannot enter the school because they don't have the money. They don't have the money. So all the more they are marginalized. And in the end, I felt that they are already strangers to me, and they have become strangers also to the church. That's also my dilemma in the place where I work now, in the Apostolic Vicariate of Jolo. You see, I have 3 military escorts. Our cathedral has 11 military guarding the Catholic Church because of the bombing in 2019, where 28 died instantly because of twin bombs that exploded. So because of that, I was well guarded. But you see the implication of that in my ministry? I was not accepted in the homes or places where I wanted to visit because I am a bishop and because I have military escorts around me. It became a barrier in a way, that institutional authority, and in fact, that dignity of being a bishop became a barrier for me to reach out and for them to come to me. So these are challenges that we may experience precisely because we have built walls, we have fossilized buildings, and they can only enter if they have the credential. But we are asked to step down, to go down and walk, most especially to the most vulnerable members of our society. So it asks to slow down, to listen deeply, to be changed by voices we hear, especially those we have long ignored. There are 3 fundamental elements of synodality, and we know that communion, participation, and mission. May I share with you something about these features of synodality. Every home begins with a welcome, and in the synodal vision, welcome becomes a way of life. The church is not meant to be a place of silence for the unheard, but a table where every voice matters. A community built not on uniformity, but on communion, the sacred bond of unity in diversity. Synodality invites us to cherish not only what we have in common, but what makes each person unique. In our community, we have to cherish the wisdom of the elderly, the fire of the youth, the pain of the excluded, the questions of the doubting. And these are inside our community, because inside our communities, we have elderly, we have youth, we have persons who feel excluded. There are persons who are always doubting our missions and ministries. These are inside our community. And we have to dismantle these barriers of being elderly, of being youth, of being excluded, of doubting our community. We have to dismantle their barriers to be able to foster unity. And that is not easy. We know that is not easy in a community. But, communion is the foundation of synodality. We are sent in mission as a community, not as an individual. The mission, the quality of our mission will depend a lot on our community. If we have a very good community and a very good witness, then the probability of missionary success is very, very possible. But if our community cannot be a witness to other people, then it may sacrifice our mission. Now, in my own reflection, there are so many ways of fostering communion in a community. But I'll just share with you interdependence as a way towards unity and communion among consecrated persons. I reflected on this, and this may probably resonate also to your own communities. When I was provincial of the Oblates of Mary Immaculate and now as bishop, I find interdependence as a virtue that is very important in a community. To foster interdependence is to create a healthy tension between mission and missionaries. There are two observable dynamics occurring between men and leadership in the province when confronted with difficult issues. Leaderships, please listen, leaderships looks at attitudes and traits of religious as the real problem and mission. You know, when you are a leader and there is a problem in the community, normally we attribute the problem to traits. To traits. The mission is happening because you are like this and that. On the other hand, mission, men in the province, or what I call as frontliners, see not traits as problems in our community and mission, but rather institutional policies as core issues why people leave the congregation. That's why we always have in our communities that tension between person and institution. You listen to your superior, and they will always say you are problematic, faith-based. And then men in the province would also say to the administration, your policies are the problems in our mission. We have that tension oftentimes. So those in the corridors of power normally attribute problems related to traits and dispositions of men. Hence, the intervention are also person-based, such as leadership formation, healing session, seminary curriculum, among others. Whereas, the man of the province look at the structures and policies are core issues. I see this as tensions, oftentimes, that we encounter in our communities. That's why we have to create a healthy tension between mission and missionaries. The second, to foster interdependence, is to embrace members of our community who are in crisis. We are not a perfect community. There will always be persons along the way who will be in crisis. How do we take care of them? Our communities are microcosm of wounded families, communities, nations, and of the world. We cannot claim that only those who deviate from the ideals of our community be ostracized or thrown out. Consecrated communities are composed of sin-stained sinners, of wounded healers, of imperfect persons. The fact that they are consecrated persons, God has a purpose in calling and putting them in our communities. We need to show compassion and not commit a lot of uncharitable behaviors and abusive languages to those already in pain. I remember with pain until now, when I was provincial of the Oblates of Mary Immaculate, a member of our community refused by 5 communities to be their member. I begged them to be charitable to no avail. In another instance, blame as well for promoting a person to priesthood who lived in limbo after only 5 years due to personal issues. We are called to be healers in and out of our community. If we are to be successful missionaries, we need to foster unity. We need to help our brothers and sisters in crisis. That is, I think, the meaning of fostering unity and communion within our communities. Religious life is not just for the pure, the talented, the good, the humble, and the honest. The story of Jesus was also written and keeps being written by the impure, by sinners, by calculating schemers, and by those without worldly talents. Nobody is so bad, so insignificant, to devoid of talents, or to be so outside the circle of faith. He or she is outside the story of Christ, according to Ron Rolheiser. The next, I think, which is very important in fostering community, interdependence, is to strengthen the bond of charity among consecrated persons within a community. We need to accompany each other and be a source of strength and encouragement. We can do this interdependence only if we dialogue, only if we listen, and only if we step down and decide to journey with them. The third is participation, the sacred act of listening. What transforms a building into a house is not walls, it is relationship. Relationships that begins with listening. Synodality asks us to listen, to understand, not to control. It invites us to participate, to see participation as a sacred act of belonging, where priests and parishioners, the scholars and the seekers, all have something to offer. When every member of the church is empowered to speak, and every leader trained to listen, something beautiful happens. So people stop feeling like guests and start living in the family. And participate should not only be within the walls of our communities, but also in the people that we serve, the laity, the clergy, and the hierarchy. Participation provides a meaningful platform to express their views, share their experiences, and influence decision. The third pillar of synodality is mission, a home that opens its door. A synodal church is not turned inward like a fortress. It looks outward like a house with an open door. This is the church that Jesus imagined. A shepherd seeking the lost, a Samaritan crossing the road, a master throwing a feast for the forgotten. I remember one of the priests outside of the vicariate asked me, "Why are you working in a place with only 2% Catholics? Why are you wasting your time in that far-flung area while we lack priests here in the metropolitan city?" I told him, "You see, the church mission is for the kingdom of God. We work for the kingdom of God, and most especially to the most vulnerable members of our society." You see, in the Apostolic Vicariate of Olo, we have 9 vicariate schools. And, Muslims really enroll in our Catholic institutions because they see future. They're dreamers and they know that their dreams can be fulfilled by entering into our schools. And I told also in every conferences of Catholic educators in the Philippines, I always tell them to please accommodate the most vulnerable in our schools, because if they remain at the periphery, they are easy prey for radicalization. They are easy prey for misinformation. And they eventually will become voters, and we don't know if they will vote for good candidates. Without touching their hearts and without having influence to these people, I don't know what will happen to our country. If we want to have nation building, we really have to invest. And that investment is taking care of the most vulnerable members of our community. Seeing that they, in a way, are influenced by us. So, synodality renews our commitment. Synodality renews our commitment to mission, not as conquest, but as companionship. It asks, how do we walk with the poor? How do we heal the earth? How do we speak truth in digital spaces? How do we become light in dark places? So synodality enriches the church's engagement with society, fulfilling its mission of love, service, and outreach. Forming hearts for the long journey, that's what we want. This journey is not easy, but synodality takes time. It requires formation, prayer, and the courage to let go of power. To be a synodal church, we need leaders who listen more than they speak, and communities that discern more than they dictate. We must teach people not just to participate, but to walk together, even when the road is long and the way is unclear. Sustaining synodality requires leaders who practice shared authority and collaborative discipleship. It is a slow revolution of the heart, and we must be patient, but we have to be very courageous to step down, get away from our walls, open our walls, not for them to enter, but for us to reach out, most especially to the most vulnerable. That, I think, is the core of what synodality is all about. When we courageously steps down from the comfort of our rooms, the walls of our institutions, and decide to embrace and journey with the most vulnerable members of our society. In all of this, we turn to Mary, the Marian and the Marist way. I certainly believe that in this synodal journey, religious consecrated persons, religious life have really something to teach the institutional church how to be synodal. In all of this, we turn to Mary, the first disciple and quiet companion of Jesus. Mary did not stand at the center. She stood with Jesus, the apostles, and the most vulnerable members of our society. She pondered, she followed, and she stayed. The Marist Charism teaches us this Marian spirit, the synodal spirit, that of heediness rather than recognition, that of presence rather than performance, that of solidarity with the lowly rather than distance from the margins. A synodal church is a Marian church, tender, listening, and faithful. We are not finished products. We are going forth. We are journeying as pilgrims of hope. The church is not yet the home she is called to be. We are moving forward, but we are on the way, and that is synodality is the way. Let us ask ourselves, who still feels like a strangers in our church? Whose voice have we not yet heard? How can I make space for someone else in the journey? We may not have all the answers, but together, with open hearts and open hands, we can keep making room in the tent. And as a way of conclusion, the church, the synodal church is home. In the end, the synodal church is not about documents or debates. It is about relationship. It is about building something beautiful together where all people, most especially the most vulnerable members of the society, are with us in our hearts, in our journey, in our ministry, in our educational institutions, where they are no longer strangers to us, and where they are no longer, they feel strangers in our institutions. Because we have decided to be a church that listens, to be a church that includes, to be a church that sends, and to be a church that serves, not as a duty, but as a joy of serving the kingdom of God. A church that opens its arms and says to every soul, welcome home. Thank you, my brothers and sisters, for listening.